Tag TV and Tag Radio be seen and heard by both technology users and technology producers throughout the state of Georgia and around the world. Low cost, big benefits, powerhouse online branded video and audio has arrived. Tag TV, Tag Radio, there's a lot more to know. The 2013 Georgia Tech Cybersecurity Summit. It's the 11th offering of the Atlanta IT community's foremost event on cybersecurity. Focused on strengthening connections between the academic, policy, and industry sectors of the community, the summit brings together top thought leaders to explore cyber threats and ways of countering them. Greetings, everyone. It's Tuesday, October 29, 2013, and this is Tech Talk with Technology Association of Georgia President Tino Mantella. I'm your guest host, Frank Baia. Attendees from Atlanta and around the country gathered to develop strategies for securing information networks and to explore potential countermeasures for cyber threats. The summit also marks the publication of the annual Georgia Tech Emerging Cyber Threats Report, an expert-driven outlook of the IT security issues and opportunities for the year ahead. Up to the Tech Talk, Paul Royal, a research scientist in the College of Computing at Georgia Tech and Associate Director of the Georgia Tech Information Security Center. In these roles, Paul engages in collaborative research on various aspects of the online criminal ecosystem. As an active member of the information security community, he has served on various working groups whose efforts lead to the takedown of large botnets and the arrest of the criminal operators behind them. Royal is also a frequent press resource on security issues and has been quoted in USA Today, The Washington Post, Forbes, and others. This year's Cybersecurity Summit will feature keynote given by Martin Hellman, who along with Whitfield Diffie and Ralph Merkle invented public key cryptography. The technology secures trillions of dollars a day in financial transactions ranging from internet credit card purchases to electronic banking and foreign exchange. The summit also marks the publication of the annual Georgia Tech Emerging Cyber Threats Report, an expert-driven outlook of the IT security issues and opportunities for the year ahead. The summit, hosted by the Georgia Tech Information Security Center and the Cyber Technology and Information Security Lab of the Georgia Tech Research Institute. Here to give us details about the 11th offering of the Atlanta IT community's foremost event on cybersecurity, the 2013 Georgia Tech Cybersecurity Summit, we speak with Paul Royal, a research scientist in the College of Computing at Georgia Tech and the Associate Director of the Georgia Tech Information Security Center. This edition of Tech Talk is brought to you by GlobalSpeak.com, new media consultants, corporate video and audio communications, video and audio production and distribution, live and virtual event production. Tag TV and Tag Radio is a service of GlobalSpeak.com, creatively delivering powerful marketing, video, and audio solutions. Paul, welcome to Tech Talk.
Thanks, Frank. Great to be here.
I think probably a subject that is absolutely on everybody's mind just about every day. I think so much of what we do is to transfer trust over to technology so often that we almost take it for granted that everything is going to be safe and secure. I was talking to an associate just this morning about the next crazy thing that's going on, something about literally holding me hostage, a file that I end up opening that somehow or another either infers that it's going to freeze my computer or it freezes it unless I pay a ransom. What's the deal on that?
Well, to start, unfortunately, that file can be delivered to your computer from, for example, you visiting a compromised legitimate web page. And what that means is that you may go to a news site or, again, a site that you regularly visit, and that site has been compromised. And as a consequence, without your knowledge, software on your computer is attacked, and this file is delivered and run. And in this case, the file has been created by a group of criminals that will basically pretend to be a form of law enforcement and extort money from you by saying you have violated such and such law and you have to pay to unlock your computer. And in some cases, they'll represent like federal law enforcement, like the FBI, and of course they're happy to misuse the various seals and symbols and logos. In other cases, they'll pretend to be a commercial company working with, for example, the U.S. federal government.
Now, you know that obviously we're talking about, I'm sure in your world, something relatively trite in comparison to some of the major hacking or major security breaches that can go underway. So obviously something that touches all of us is that kind of thing that we're talking about. But maybe now take it a little bit further, go up the scale and say, what are some of the kinds of things that literally government agencies, large enterprise face in terms of botnets, is what you would call them, or botnets?
Yeah, in academia we sometimes refer to them as malicious overlay networks. And these are basically collections of compromised computer systems under the control of a malicious third party. Botnets are used from everything, for example, to the generation of unsolicited email or spam. They're actually responsible for over 90% of the spam that we don't want each day. And in a more targeted manner, they can be used to exfiltrate intellectual property and to steal national secrets.
Now, one of the things, obviously, that is, I think, really a major significance to our listening audience is the fact that there's a lot of subject matter expertise and a lot of information that's available. Often the problem is it's after the fact that you go searching for that information. We've got an upcoming kind of proactive situation, and I guess what I'm talking about is the Georgia Tech Cybersecurity Summit that's coming up. Let's talk a little bit about, rather than going into the particulars, which we can in a second, our listening audience knowing just how they can migrate the cost that's involved in dealing with some of the insights and protecting themselves, and why it's important to take kind of proactive initiative to learn and understand things before they happen. Maybe go into a little bit about, before we get into what's going to happen at the summit, what you might want to take away from it or be able to take away from it.
Sure, Frank. Traditionally, information security has been something that is largely reactive on the defender side. What we hoped to do with the summit is to provide a more forward-thinking outlook on what threats businesses and governments will face in the year ahead and perhaps even longer than that. And we hope that by informing members of industry and government that they'll be able to preemptively address potential threats coming down the pipe before they are a major problem. All
sizes, small, medium, large, or is it just for the larger companies? I mean,
I would say it's all sizes. Everything from protecting, a Fortune 100 company down to even protecting, a one-person startup.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things that a lot of people know, as far as especially a lot of the locals, is that Georgia Tech fits very high into the cybersecurity landscape, not only from an Atlanta perspective, but literally from a nationally and even international perspective. Go into a little bit about Georgia Tech's role as far as cybersecurity.
Well, sure. So at Georgia Tech, we have a dual mission of research, high-impact research, and education. And on the research end of things, we've grown to become very well known within the information security space. If for example, you take any top-tier academic security conference, at any year you'll find members, for example, of the Georgia Tech Information Security Center publishing in that conference who have been accepted to it. On the industry front, one of the most premier industry security conferences is Black Hat. Members of GTISC spoke at this year's Black Hat USA, and it was actually our 5th consecutive appearance at Black Hat. And as you may know, in the past, Georgia Tech has acted as an incubator for research that has led to the creation of businesses that have succeeded internationally. And there are many cybersecurity-related tag companies with either Georgia Tech roots or ties to tag.
Okay, so just for our listening audience, and I'm sure they'll be able to get more information, but to make sure that everybody kind of marks their calendar, we are talking about Wednesday, November the 6th, 2013. It's going to be at the GTRI Conference Center, great location, easy to get to, plenty of parking, and it's going to run from 9:30 till just after noon, 12:15. Let's talk about, pronounce it correctly, cryptography?
Cryptography, that's right.
And why is that important to me?
Well, cryptography is a way of securing endpoint communications or protecting data that is sensitive or important to you, to make sure that other people can't, for example, view that information. That's important to you because increasingly we have to communicate with different systems across the internet and on private networks, and that we don't want anyone who doesn't have authorization, who doesn't have a need to view this information, to view it.
Okay, and so the reason I bring it up, I'm conscious of the agenda, and I know Martin Hellman, he's credited with the invention of public key cryptography, and I guess is there a difference, say a significant difference between, say, I guess non-public? I mean, what would be the difference?
Sure, non-public, otherwise known as symmetric key cryptography.
See, I knew that. I would have said that if you gave me a long enough time to come up with it. No, I'm kidding. I wouldn't. What's it called again?
Well, so traditional cryptography, prior to the creation of public key cryptography, is now known as symmetric key cryptography.
Okay.
What that fundamentally means, in layman terms, is that you have to pre-share a secret in order to protect endpoint communications. And so what changed with public key cryptography, or with the invention of public key cryptography, is that you no longer need a pre-shared secret. You can actually communicate with people spontaneously without having to share something before you communicate. And that, of course, is now used to secure literally trillions of dollars worth of financial transactions across the globe every day. And it should be, or rather, it should be mentioned that there are other implementations of public key cryptography besides, for example, the Diffie-Hellman key exchange, and one of the most popular is RSA. And one thing that unfortunately RSA doesn't provide is a relatively technical term called perfect forward secrecy. And one thing that Martin and Dr. Hellman and Dr. Diffie's work provides is this idea of perfect forward secrecy in their exchange. And basically what that means in a nutshell, as it is important to a day-to-day consumer, especially given everything that's come out in the press this year, is that if a long-term secret is compromised, for example, a company's private key, all the communications you've had up to that point still have their confidentiality, are basically their secrecy protected.
Okay, so again, obviously I'm going to be hypersensitive to this from the enterprise standpoint because of whatever the methodology of transaction I'm involved in. Transaction could be monetary, transaction could be communicative about engineering designs or patents or something to that effect. Then the other side of it is that from a consumer standpoint, I'm probably going to be oblivious to it. Would it be just a case where I'm dealing with some kind of secure link, or is there something that, from a consumer standpoint, I would be looking for to know that I've got that kind of security going on in terms of a particular communication or transaction?
Well, at the most basic level, if you're a consumer, let's say you're checking your email, let's say you're searching for something online, let's say you're buying something online. Mm-hmm. The business of those activities is none but your own as a consumer, unless you'd like other people to know, for example. And of course, the rise of social networks means that some people want to share this information.
Yeah.
But that said, typically what you'll look for is HTTPS, right? And so what that means is HTTP over an SSL socket or over SSL communications. That actually makes use of public key cryptography. But again, not all uses of public key cryptography are equally secure. And companies that are in many cases on the bleeding edge and are very security aware, companies such as Google, are, for example, combining Diffie-Hellman with RSA to add these additional security guarantees like perfect forward secrecy. So among things like Google Search, for the portion of it that's encrypted, and Google Mail, these are already in place, transparent to the consumer, and will work, provided that the consumer is using a compatible software product.
Is it naive to think that there's a point where the madness will stop, as Mr. Wonderful says? Let's stop the madness. I mean, or is it a case where it's always going to be a chess game and someone's going to be out there trying to beat the system?
Well, unfortunately, there's always going to be pressure to innovate, and that's not really the unfortunate part. The unfortunate part is that there's also always going to be pressure to innovate quickly, and usually at the cost of safety and security. Because at the end of the day,
how do you discover something new until it happens?
Well, yes, and I mean, and fundamentally, it's unlikely, frankly, that consumers and businesses are going to choose security over usability.
Sure.
Which means we're always going to have to try and find the best compromises we can to get the best security we can get among the demands for the demands for features in an increasingly connected world.
Well, it kind of brings me to the another point. I know that one of the things that's going to be talked about at the conference is the you will be discussing a number of cybersecurity issues, but also you're going to be looking at the emerging threats report. Maybe tell our listening audience what that's about.
Well, the threats report attempts to codify our thoughts on what threats are going to appear in the future. Again, some of these have only been discovered in academic research labs. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't care about them. We should care about them because we believe they may be popularized going forward. For example, one item that we discuss, or one topic we discuss in the report, is the Internet of Things and the security implications of the Internet of Things. So, fundamentally, what the Internet of Things means is that soon everything is going to be connected. My refrigerator, for example, could warn me that my milk is about to expire, or that I need to buy more eggs, or whatever have you. And all these things that we previously assumed were not connected will be connected. And many of them, if they do have any intelligence or logic to them now, were designed and implemented without the assumption that they're going to be on a potentially hostile network, which, of course, is the Internet these days.
Well, that's fascinating because, there isn't a day goes by, and especially a lot of times as far as Tech Talk is concerned, we'll talk about it's the same thing, only different, because of things like clouds and because of the wireless ubiquitousness of the applications that everybody's doing something that they think is unique to their segment, to their vertical, when in reality it's the same thing other people are doing. And the Internet of Internets, as you're calling it, is that the correct terminology for it? Because I think
we're calling it the Internet of Things.
The Internet of Things.
Basically means that all things will eventually be connected to the Internet or to some network that will have an Internet connection.
I love it. One of the things that we challenge here is the semantics keeping up with the technology evolution. Clouds and networks and channels and on and on and on. So we now have a new term, and we're going to call it the Internet of Things. Because I think that's an opportunity for almost every listener, because they're in whatever industry they're going to be involved in, they will see a time when all things are going to be interconnected, even maybe within that vertical, but then eventually even outside that vertical, and again, connected, as you're pointing out, to the Internet of all things. Well, we're quickly running out of time. It's the 2013 Georgia Tech Cybersecurity Summit. It's the 11th offering of the Atlanta IT community's foremost event on cybersecurity. I think one of the things, Paul, give me a couple of seconds of why you would say to a local executive that they should take the time to make sure that they attend.
Well, part of being secure means preparing for the threats to come, and presumably the more forward-looking knowledge we're able to acquire about potential threats that we may face in real-world context going forward, presumably the better we'll be able to respond to those threats. It's
Wednesday, November the 6th, 2013, from 9:30 a.m. to 12:15 at the Georgia Tech Research Institute's Conference Center, GTRI, and that's at 250 14th Street. Well, I'll tell you, Paul, we're going to ask you to come back because I think it's a case where even beyond the concentrated intelligence that will be gathered at the event is the ongoing dialogue and discussion. We're all interested in the subject, and to have access to the kind of expertise at Tech and the kind of talent that you represent is truly a blessing in this competitive environment that we live in every day. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us today on Tech Talk.
Thanks, Frank. It's been a pleasure.